This country looks like paradise, and that is exactly why this story shocks people. New Zealand regularly ranks in the top 10 globally for safety, governance, and quality of life, yet it is quietly losing its own population at a rate that rivals far poorer nations. The country has just over 5.3 million people, but nearly 600,000 New Zealand-born citizens now live overseas, and more than 500,000 of them live in Australia alone. That means roughly 1 in 10 New Zealanders does not live in New Zealand. Stay until the end because the reason this is happening is not obvious, the numbers are getting worse, and reversing it may be politically impossible. New Zealand is one of the most geographically isolated developed economies on Earth, sitting over 1,500 kilometers from its nearest major market. That isolation makes scale brutally difficult. Industries that rely on volume, logistics, or proximity to supply chains struggle to compete. Manufacturing represents a much smaller share of GDP than in comparable advanced economies, and high-value global services cluster elsewhere. Meanwhile, Australia, with a population of over 26 million and multiple cities above 5 million people, offer far deeper labor markets. Average full-time wages in Australia are roughly 15 to 25% higher than in New Zealand, depending on the sector, and senior professional roles are far more common. For young workers, especially under 35, the difference is decisive. Then there's housing. Housing-related activity in New Zealand accounts for close to half of total economic output when construction, finance, real estate services, and regulation are combined. As of recent data, the median house price nationally has hovered around 7 to 8 times median household income, compared to a long-term global affordability benchmark of 3 to 4 times income. In Auckland, that ratio has been even higher. Governments attempted to cool demand by restricting overseas buyers, but foreign purchasers represented only about 3% of transactions before the ban. The largest foreign buyers were largely untouched because Australians are exempt under trans-Tasman agreements. Australians earn more on average, face higher prices at home, and do not pay stamp duty when buying property in New Zealand, a tax that can reach tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars on a single purchase in Australia. The result is sustained demand pressure that local first-time buyers cannot match. Agriculture adds another layer. New Zealand is one of the most productive agricultural exporters per hectare in the world, supplying dairy, meat, and produce to Asia and beyond. But agriculture employs less than 6% of the workforce and is increasingly mechanized. High land values encourage automation, not job creation, so educated urban workers are left with limited domestic options. This is where New Zealand becomes an outlier. Most countries experiencing brain drain lose people to distant markets. New Zealand loses people to a country 3 hours away by plane, with the same language, similar culture, mutual recognition of qualifications, and near-open labor mobility. Moving from Auckland to Sydney is often easier than moving from one EU country to another. Education accelerates the trend. Australian universities offer more places, larger research budgets, and treat many New Zealand students as domestic for tuition and loan access. In some professional programs, New Zealanders can make up a significant share of cohorts. Once graduates enter the Australian workforce, return rates drop sharply. To compensate, New Zealand relies heavily on immigration. Net migration has driven population growth, even as citizens leave. But here is the uncomfortable data point. A significant share of migrants who gained residency or citizenship in New Zealand later move on, often to Australia, using New Zealand as a stepping stone into a larger labor market. This creates a churn effect. Young locals leave, migrants arrive, then many of them leave too. Meanwhile, the population that grows fastest inside New Zealand is older and wealthier. Roughly 90,000 Australians live in New Zealand, disproportionately retirees or lifestyle migrants who contribute less to the labor force. From a geopolitical angle, this trend has not gone unnoticed by national leaders. Former New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern openly acknowledged during her tenure that sustained outward migration, especially of young and skilled workers, posed long-term risks to economic resilience and national capability. Her finance minister, Grant Robertson, repeatedly warned that losing working-age citizens while relying heavily on inward migration created structural pressure on productivity, public services, and fiscal stability. More recently, Chris Hipkins admitted that competition with Australia for talent is one of New Zealand's hardest strategic challenges, describing the trans-Tasman labour market as fundamentally unbalanced given Australia's larger economy and higher wages. On the Australian side, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has framed the movement of New Zealanders as a net positive for Australia's national interest, noting that New Zealand-born workers play a critical role in sectors like healthcare, construction, and education, contributing billions of dollars annually to Australia's economy. Defense and foreign policy commentators in Wellington have also linked the issue to regional security, arguing that with New Zealand spending less than 2% of GDP on defense and facing growing Indo-Pacific instability, a shrinking domestic skills base weakens long-term strategic autonomy. Collectively, these statements reveal an uncomfortable reality. While Australia quietly strengthens its economic and geopolitical position by absorbing skilled labor, New Zealand's leadership is increasingly aware that continued population leakage could over time reduce the country's influence, resilience, and bargaining power on the global stage. That shifts the economic balance further. Can this be fixed? Tightening movement with Australia would directly affect over 10% of New Zealand citizens living abroad and would face overwhelming political resistance. Building new globally competitive industries takes decades. Forcing down house prices risks household balance sheets tied to property wealth. Yet doing nothing means continuing to lose the most productive age group in the economy. Stability, safety, and beauty attract capital and retirees, while its scale and isolation push away workers. From the outside, it still looks like a dream. From the inside, the numbers tell a different story. And the real risk is not collapse. It is becoming a country that exports its future faster than it can replace it. If you enjoyed this content, subscribing is the best way to support the channel and see future videos.